remembering that road to estimate how much it would cost. Going back 10, 15 years, it's 300 million.
300 million.
Wow. Actually, that is
To repave it all and redo it all.
Give me a tone, we are live.
We're live?
Yep. Well,
Yeah, we're punctual. Thank you, Tyler. I'll call this meeting to order. It's 9 a.m. Thursday, April 17th, 2025. I'd like to acknowledge the meeting takes place on the traditional territory of the Stahelis. Are there any late items to introduce this morning? Seeing none, I'll go to the next item on our agenda, which is approval of the agenda.
so move, Mayor Talon.
Moved by Councillor Pacho, seconded by Councillor Schweinbenz. Discussion on that. I'll call the vote. All in favor, and the agenda is approved unanimously, which takes us to Committee of the Whole meeting items for discussion. And we have a presentation by Mr. Dan Maldoff on the dike upgrade project. CIO.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to, I did speak to council in advance, but I just want for anybody that's watching from home, I want to let them know that the presentation from Mr. Maldoff will be, it will be added to our the agenda package after the meeting. And also that what we'll do the process with council is we're going to step through each slide. And discussion will begin and end on each slide, and then we'll move to the next one.
Thanks, everyone.
Floor is yours.
See you all again. So just introduction, I am Dan Maldoff. I'm a hydrotechnical engineer at Northwest Hydraulic Consultants. We're the prime consultant on the flood mitigation upgrade project. We're working with a team that includes Space to Place, who is the landscape architect, Thurber, who is our geotechnical engineer, and Legacy Environmental is our qualified environmental professional. And that is our team on this project. So items we're going to cover today, just, we're all familiar with the project, but just a quick reminder of what we're doing. A summary of the public engagement that took place in March 2025, main themes for the comments and questions, and then walking through some responses, and then some discussion of next steps and how we might go forward with the design, considering the feedback we received. So just to go over the project, there are two main components. The yellow line is the dike. That is an official provincial dike. And then the pink line is the road out to the wastewater treatment plant and the shoreline around the wastewater treatment plant. The project includes upgrading the road and shoreline to the wastewater treatment plant to withstand a large flood. And that includes raising the height of the road and improving the erosion protection along the shoreline. And then for the dike, it includes upgrades to the dike, mainly involving a higher crest elevation. So we've been communicating on this project for a while and have had several meetings about this. At previous meetings, council has directed staff to proceed with design for upgrades of the wastewater treatment plant road and shoreline, as well as the earth-filled dike through Randolph Park. And then zones 3, 4, and 5, which are the majority of the dike, we are still working together through some concepts to move forward with.
Any questions on this slide, where we're at today? So the existing direction is preliminary design work for zone 6, 1, and 2, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the, if I may.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think we need to ensure that we're moving this project forward. And the critical piece to this project right now is the zone 1 and 2. and ensuring that our critical infrastructure and access to our infrastructure is protected. Unless council would like to revisit zone 6 perhaps, I really want to emphasize that we keep moving forward with zone 1 and 2 and get that to a stage where perhaps, by the end of this year, we can be looking at moving to construction, because I don't want to lose sight on the importance of that area. And not to say that the community isn't more important, but there's other considerations that council is that we're working through. So I just want to make sure that that council does understand that staff is going to go full steam ahead with zone 1 and 2 and 6 unless there's a different direction.
Councillor Swain.
Thank you, Mayor Talon. So just on that, is there something you need from council today to carry on? My understanding is that we're going to proceed with the design and get the ball rolling, as you say, on zone 1 and 2.
I have some ideas at the end about how to make decisions
Okay,
and how to peel this back.
Okay,
But this is a recap of council direction to date. At the end, I think we need to have a discussion about how we make decisions to advance or proceed or not proceed with the whole project.
perfect. If I may, with
Yeah, go ahead.
regards to zone 6, do we have a plan to take care of, on the far east side of zone 6 is the road, obviously. Are we going to put a bump in the road to make sure that that dike is continued? Do we have some contingency plans around that? Because the water could come up over that road there.
My suspicion is that's all gonna be part of the design, and that's part of the deployable system is my guess today. But it's a good question, we won't forget it, there will be an answer.
Yeah.
Mr. Maldoff, do you have a quick answer right now before?
Yeah, I mean, just to confirm, that absolutely does need to be raised to the same crest elevation as the road. The thought is to make that a deployable section that could be placed during a flood. Another option is to put a bump in the road, as you said. We would need to look at that further through the design process.
Councillor Black.
Thank you, Mayor Talon. Through you to our CAO. What is the amount of the funding that we have so far? And will that cover the costs of what is needed for zone 1, 2, and 6?
I know what the answer to this question is, so I'll let the
I think I
speak
do
to it.
too, but for
Thank
those
you,
that
Rachel.
are in the gallery or listening
Yeah.
online, I think.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship, through to Councillor Vital. We have $11 million in total for the whole project. So certainly zone 1, 2, and 6 will be funded fully through that grant funding.
I've seen the slide presentation, so all these questions are coming up, because those are some of the questions. So this slide, I know we want to jump into the heart of it. This slide was just meant to recap, I believe, the existing council direction and the scope of the project. So if we can let Mr.
forward
Malcolm.
then, Mayor
So good,
Talon.
yeah, we're gonna hold those questions, they're coming up.
Okay. So our March 2025 public engagement, we had a public open house the evening of March 3rd at Memorial Hall. At that open house, we had a box where attendees could anonymously submit their questions and comments. We received 25 submitted comments there. Prior to the meeting, we had 22 community questions that were forwarded to us to consider. And also during that public engagement period, we received 2 email responses. And the main themes that the questions and comments covered were just increasing the understanding of the need for the project. Questions about the proposed dike crest level and the degree to which the dike should be raised. Questions about project cost and the available funding, impacts during construction, and waterfront experience and impacts to the view by the dike upgrades. So we have more detail on each of these main themes that we can walk through. but those are the categories. So project rationale, examples of questions we received were things like, why isn't the existing dike good enough? What happens if we don't upgrade the dike? And just an understanding of what the flood hazards are in the village of Harrison Hot Springs. Some comments about other flood hazards such as local flooding from the Miami River or the Fraser River flooding from the south, and just clarifying what the dike is designed to protect against. So the dike has worked so far. The existing dike under current analysis is built to roughly a 100-year flood standard. The probability of a 100-year or larger flood each year is 1%. There's a 22% probability of a flood exceeding the design event happening in 25 years, and greater than 50% over a 75-year period. So the existing dike was built after the 1948 flood, which was about a 200-year flood. Since that time, that was 77 years ago. So that, considering that period of time, there was essentially a coin toss as to whether the existing dike would have been exceeded. And luckily, we've come out on the favorable side of that coin toss. But in terms of probability, that's what we were looking at over that period. So really, the reason the existing dike hasn't been overtopped is because there just hasn't been a large enough flood. But it's all looking at those probabilities. And then for the proposed crest level, the standard considers a flood that is larger than a 500-year flood. It's based on the 1894 Fraser River flood of record. And over that same 75-year period, there is a 14% chance of a flood larger than that occurring. So, still some possibility, but much reduced compared to the current situation.
Questions on this slide? This is a big slide. Councilor Kelly.
Sorry, yeah.
No, this is a
Mayor
ton of
Talon,
information on this deck.
So just to confirm, the 1893 flood, that was a 500-year flood?
It was larger than a 500-year flood. I think the estimate now is that it's estimated to be closer to a 750-year flood, but officially it's been stated as being roughly a 500-year flood.
Yeah, because if I may,
go ahead.
Apparently the oral traditions of the First Nations in this area, the Stahelis and others, are that there were even bigger floods in the past.
For sure.
And there's a reason why Harrison Hot Springs was never a permanent settlement. And that's because every few generations, the First Nations had understood that there was going to be floods here that would wipe out their villages. So I appreciate that, what a 100-year and a 500-year flood means. And the reality is we have $1.6 billion apparently of building stock here currently. It's only going to increase, and we have an opportunity to protect it, or a responsibility to protect it if we can. So this is useful data. Appreciate that.
Councilor Pacho.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a correction here. We did have a major flood, high water, and I think before we had the screws in the new flood pump, we had extra pumps come from Kent, and the water came from Lillooet River. It didn't hit Agassiz, it hit Harrison. It was all the way up to the stone wall along the beach. Came up very, very high, and that was just heavy rainfall. It came up from the Lillooet River. So, and the other major one was when we had the army here to 1999, I believe. We had the the registration at Seabird Island for all the residents and everything else, and we were on standby to be evacuated. And also, yeah, the army was here to move all the folks and the cattle from Agassiz to Bellingham. So what I'm trying to say is, I know there's a lot of folks out there that think that this will never happen. Well, they said it would never happen in Abbotsford. So it happened. So that's where I'm coming from. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Batchel. Councillor Vital.
Thank you, Mayor Talon. Through you, I'm just curious with the data that has been collected. And I know it's probably very difficult, but do you take into consideration climate change? And I know that Mount Breckenridge has always had the potential to erupt or to cause a severe landslide into the lake. So just curious, I know it must be or is there not enough data with climate change to indicate that?
Yeah, so these levels that you see here, these are collected, these are observed water levels on Harrison Lake. This is actual recorded water levels. There are projections for what those lake levels under the same probabilities might look like under climate change. In general, it's the latest projection is just under a meter higher for the same flood probability.
Okay.
So that, you know, that 500-year flood would be just under a meter higher by the end of the century under current projections. Now, nobody knows exactly what's going to happen. But still that does need to be considered in the approach.
Thank you.
And you had a question about the landslide as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, the waves associated with a landslide generated event, you know, would be 20 to 25 meters high, and that's just not something you could design the dike for.
Okay, thank you.
25 meters. Thank you. Councillor Schwab, that's
So, Mayor Talon, if I could continue on that thought about climate change, please. You know, snowpack, maybe we've been lulled into a false sense of security, but snowpacks for the last couple of decades have been decreasing. So the risk of the spring freshet problem seems to maybe be going away with climate change. So can you comment on that? And are we still worried about the spring freshet? Have we been lulled into a sense of false security here? Could we get a 200-year or 200% year of snowpack one day and then cause this freshet problem? And also on the seasonal rains, are these going to get worse with climate change and therefore make the flood events in a rain event, atmospheric river event worse? Can you comment on that?
Yeah, so there is a projection of more severe weather, bigger precipitation events, also potentially warmer temperatures. So as you said, you could see smaller snowpacks, but the event that causes the largest floods here is a big Fraser River flood. And it's a really big and complicated watershed, many components to it. You know, even with a smaller snowpack, you could have something like a rapid warming and a big rain event that comes in, and you get rapid melting, which causes flood levels to spike. So it's a bit hard to predict exactly what is going to happen. It could play out in several ways, as you suggest.
but the current modeling suggests that the risk of flooding is greater with climate change because we could get a flash thaw with a rain
Yes.
somehow in a complicated thing. So that's the enhanced risk. It's
Yeah.
not lower, even if the snowpack is lower, it's the concentration of flash melting or thawing it.
That's
And
possible,
that
yes.
spikes the river really fast. It's the risk, okay. Any other questions on this slide or comments?
Thank you, Your Worship. I think if, what I might do is just get council to focus on the graph to the right there. And what that does, and it's a very good indication of where most of our risk is, and it is the freshet. Blue dots are freshet and the other ones are fall and winter lake levels. And now the combination obviously is what we're concerned about. So if you look at the elevations, the very top one, that's the proposed dike height. And that is approximately a meter above the 1894. So to speak to what Daniel was speaking to is that the numbers that the previously understood levels or elevations for any floods has now increased by a meter. Is that right?
With climate
Change. So the if we were to experience an 1894 flood today, or not today, I mean, if this project is realized, then we have the water levels would be basically at the top of the dike right now, like or not right now, sorry, the dike, the proposed dike. So there's no safety factor. But if we're to see these consistent numbers where it's anything at the 1894 or below, then we have that 1 meter of safety factor, which would cover wave run up, and then the factor, the unknown factors.
Thank you. Please proceed, Mr. Melton.
Okay. So the condition of the current dike, the main concern is the crest level not being up to current standards. This is a known issue. Did a bit of looking into the history of the dike. It was built shortly after the 1948 flood. Through the 1960s, through the 1990s, there was a big federal and provincial program, the Fraser River Flood Control Program, that saw many of the dike upgrades through the region. At that time, they actually flagged the dike along Harrison Lake as being a candidate for upgrades, so they were considered at that time. From what I understand, there were some upgrades done, but they did not proceed with raising the entire dike crest. And then in 2015, the province did an inventory of dikes across the Lower Mainland, looking at their condition. And the Harrison Hot Springs dike had a crest elevation rating of 2 out of 4, indicating that it was too low. Overall rating among several factors was 2.63 out of 4. And another item to point out from that study was that there was limited geotechnical data available about the dike. We've done more investigations as part of the current project, including a drilling program. I think that took place in fall 2023. We understand that the dike is constructed mainly of sand. So there are potential concerns with a seepage related failure with that type of dike construction, water flowing through the dike and eroding it internally. Any questions about this?
I've skimmed this report, this 2015 report. It looked like it took at least 2 or 3 years to compile, I think. We're not alone in Harrison. Much of the Fraser Valley is inadequate. Doesn't get 4 out of 4 ratings. There's a lot of twos, a lot of twos, all the way down through Richmond and everywhere. So we're not alone with, and this is a report from 2015 that studied the whole river and everything. So it's this isn't new, unfortunately. I guess this moves at the pace of government, but this report's 10 years old, and now we're wrestling with a response to it today, 10 years later. Councillor Swinemans.
Sorry, thank you, Mayor Talon. And on that note then, so why now? How did we get this $11 million now? Why the urgency now? I mean, maybe it's a good thing, but I'm just curious what events led to this happening now. And secondly, we could build the best dike here, but if our neighbors up and down the river don't do their part, then it doesn't matter. We're going to get flooded from the south. So how can we reassure that residents of Harrison are going to be protected not only from the north, but also from the south?
Yeah, so the grant funding that was applied for by staff under council's direction, it's two different grants that were applied for. Just recognizing the need to upgrade the infrastructure from studies such as this. Anything else that you would add to that in terms of the context for the grant funding?
If I may?
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, so, I mean, I think the response from two different applications speaks volumes. And we've been given, the community's been given $11 million to try and address a known problem. So without saying it, they're saying it, because it's not, like this is a big project for Harrison, very small for, say, like the city of Abbotsford. They're looking for billions of dollars to upgrade their dikes. And they got, I think, $86 million to upgrade a flood pump. So they're still extremely vulnerable. The opportunity in front of this community right now is to try and address, a known issue. So I believe that the funding authorities, both provincially and federally, recognize that there's, a concern here. So I, go back to saying that if they're willing to write that check for this community, that does say a lot. And then obviously having the rationale and the experience and knowledge from the NHC is extremely important, because they've been involved with all of the studies from Hope to Richmond, including Harrison, for decades, if I'm not mistaken, through the Fraser Basin Council and all of these different initiatives.
And then flooding from elsewhere in the region, that's absolutely an issue, and a consequence of the framework that we currently have, where each local government is responsible for their own dikes. That was downloaded from the province to the municipalities in the early 2000s. So you do have a situation where local governments are relying on each other to maintain their flood protection infrastructure. Now, I do have a slide on this, but the village of Harrison Hot Springs does rely on the dikes in Kent to protect against that same very large Fraser River flood. I do know that the District of Kent is looking into the condition and upgrading those dikes. They did a risk assessment a couple of years ago and are actioning some of the items from that. Their dikes are higher relative to that flood compared to the one along Harrison Lake. And just going back to that history of the Fraser River Flood Control Program, those dikes were built around the same time as the one along Harrison Lake after the 1948 flood. They were actually raised as part of the Fraser River Flood Control Program, whereas the one along Harrison Lake was not. So that explains some of the current situation.
So just to be clear, then, the Agassiz and Kent have not raised their dikes to the provincial standard, or have they?
They have. They should be even higher, but they are higher than what is in the village of Harrison Hot Springs.
My reading of the stuff was that the Kent dikes A, B, and C are to an 1894 flood height.
Yes, without freeboard though.
I did notice just the other week, they did upgrades on some of the dikes. It looks like it's like putting giant boulders to stop the dike from being eaten away if the river tries to change course. So some riprap and protection. It's interesting, if you go past the Fraser Lodge, I think you can see the work they've done. Councillor Jackson.
Thank you, Rachel. I think I've reached the point where we have to stop talking and start doing. Federal governments, and they procrastinated for the last 50 years, and now we're in serious trouble. We can hash this for the next 3 or 4 or 5 weeks or months, and we have to get on with this. We gotta get by it. We gotta start doing it and quit talking about it, because we're not solving anything. We cannot prevent floods from coming down the Fraser River. We know that. We can't. We don't have the money to build a dike. Nobody wants to. Well, let's get on with this, please. I mean, I find we're just running around.
Fair point. I do want to get at the end is how we're going to make some decisions. And I have some ideas to share with council about how we can actually make some decisions on this and do what Councillor Jackson suggests, which is hopefully get on with it. If it is, and what is the it? I think what's important for me here is this is a response in part to a lot of the questions raised in the open houses and by residents about the need and the rationale behind, like, understand the problem. And if we understand the problem accurately and well, completely, then hopefully we can design the solution that addresses the problem. Councillor Thatcher.
Just going back to your comments a few minutes ago, Your Worship, can we just move through the whole slides, and the councillors need to make notes what they wish to ask they can do?
Okay.
Otherwise, I think we're going to be so before we even get to the question period.
There's a lot of slides.
There's a lot of
Please
slides.
proceed. And a lot of these questions are answered by subsequent slides,
Okay.
as Mr. Maldoff.
If
Yes.
there's anything big, feel
We can
free
always
to
go
jump
back.
in, but yeah.
We'll note that we can always come back to the slides at the end and
Yeah,
keep on
exactly.
parsing through. Sure.
Okay.
And
So flood events, just clarifying, the event that we're designing for is a very large Fraser River flood that historically is what has caused the highest water levels along Harrison Lake. Those typically occur in spring and early summer when there is snow melt in the Fraser River watershed. Other flood hazards in the village of Harrison Hot Springs. There could be elevated lake levels in fall or winter due to an event such as the atmospheric river, a precipitation event. The water levels historically have been quite a bit lower than what you see during freshet, but you do get much larger waves during that time of year. Local stormwater and drainage and Miami River flooding, so that's a much smaller watershed than the Fraser River watershed. That flow in the Miami River is managed by the pump station and flood box, which was upgraded in 2016 to convey the 200-year Miami River flood. My understanding during the atmospheric river, which was a large event, there was some localized flooding, but generally the water was conveyed as intended.
Correct.
Correct.
And then, as we talked about before, there's the potential for a landslide generated wave, which could be up to 20 to 25 meters high. There's a regional example on Chehalis Lake. If you look at the vegetation that's stripped from the shoreline under a similar landslide a few years ago, it supports those estimates. You wouldn't design a dike to handle that event. And then flooding from the District of Kent, we talked about this a bit as well, but the village of Harrison Hot Springs under the design flood relies on the dike along the Harrison Lake waterfront, as well as Kent dikes A, B, and C. The Kent dikes are at a higher elevation relative to that design flood than the one along Harrison Lake. So the lakefront is what would overtop first. Under that 1894 flood scenario, those Kent dikes would need to fail for inundation to happen from the south, which is certainly a possibility, but all this to say that the dike along the lakefront is an important piece of infrastructure during that event. Okay, and then consequences of flooding. So just talking about two very large floods. The 1894 flood is the largest flood in the region on record, and then 1948 was the second largest flood, which was roughly a 200-year flood. The 1894 flood, we have mostly written documentation of what that event looked like. We have some accounts of that up on this slide here. During the 1948 flood, during that event, water did come from the south. You had some more rudimentary dikes in Kent, which failed and were rebuilt after that flood. So that photo behind is from that event. The water was quite high. But I should say, even without a dike failure in Kent, the water level difference is only a few centimeters between what would come from the lake and what would come from the south. So still very high water levels under that flood event, even if those dikes didn't fail. Across the region, you had 16,000 people evacuated in 1948, 2,300 homes destroyed, 1,500 people left homeless, 10 people died. If a flood like this happened today, the impacts would be much larger. There are many more people living in the region. In the village of Harrison Hot Springs, most areas would be inundated, which is shown on that last slide there. You can see the boundaries of Harrison Hot Springs and the inundated areas. It's really most of it. The depths would be generally a meter or greater. So a lot of water, and there's one main way in and out of here, so evacuation can be a challenge. Across the region, the damage has been estimated at $30 billion. So that's a lot of cleanup, a lot of areas that are going to be tapping on resources to respond to a flood like that. So anything that you can do internally is of value to prepare for that situation. And then some other large floods that have happened in the province recently. In Grand Forks in 2018, there was a greater than 200-year flood. During that flood, 1/3 of residents had to evacuate. Over 100 people were rescued. 400 homes and 100 small businesses were destroyed. There was $38 million of damage. Since then, they are doing some major upgrades on their flood protection infrastructure, funded, I think, by other levels of government. I know the province for sure. And that is actually involving buying out or expropriating some homeowners to retreat from the floodplain, to allow for construction of this new infrastructure. So some major impacts there. Princeton, during the 2021 atmospheric river, you had a dike breach, which resulted in 290 properties being evacuated. It damaged their water supply, and they had a boil water advisory in place for 3 years. It was just lifted last November. And some were still displaced 2 years later. And then Merritt, during that same event,
I just wanted to point out that Princeton has not received any funding to upgrade any of their dikes or any of their I would say their water is back online and everything's fine there, but they have seen nothing from the federal provincial government.
And I think from what I've heard anecdotally or third hand is houses being rebuilt, they're just struggling. There's very limited financial support from province or the federal government. And if there is, it's not replacement. Councillor
Sir Maritone, if I may just hammer that point home, residents need to realize there is no help from the BC government. When these things happen, like Lytton was burned down 4 or 5 years ago, they've hardly rebuilt a house yet. Princeton's struggling, Merritt's still struggling. I had friends that I helped evacuate on Sumas Prairie. They thought provincial help was coming in terms of money and in terms of help. Nothing. Your families are destroyed, your houses are destroyed, and you get 10 cents on the dollar to help yourself rebuild this house. So I think residents need to realize that we may lose a couple of months of construction work on the waterfront, and that's a real problem, and I'd like to address that today. But we could lose 2 or 3 or 4 years, and maybe even lives if there's a major flood here. So we just need to remember that too.
Okay, last example of that same event, Merritt. So the dikes failed there as well, and this was a situation that came out that there were known issues for years that were never dealt with, which resulted in the dikes failing. There was $150 million of damage. All 7,000 residents were evacuated. And the main cause of that was actually the failure of their sewage treatment plant. So that highlights not just the safety risk to people, but also the need to protect that critical infrastructure. Yeah, there were over 600 homes destroyed, and that flood recovery is still ongoing. And if you read about it, you know, all of these areas that were impacted during the 2021 flooding are struggling to find the funding that they need to rebuild and upgrade. So that just highlights how after a disaster event like that, you know, there are many communities that are all working out of the same pot of money.
Sobering slides.
Yep. Okay. So the proposed dike crest level, just understanding the elevations that have been put forward and how we got there. So the current provincial standards, there are some questions about, you know, why are they there? Have they changed over time? And that kind of goes back to that question about why the existing dike isn't good enough, or, you know, was it good at one time and it's no longer adequate. So the standards were adopted after the current dike was funded. 1894 flood of record design flood was identified during that Fraser River flood control program. That was the design basis that was set. That program ran starting in the 1960s. So that was after the current dike was built. Also, we have better modeling and better flood estimates. And as a result of that, flood elevations have changed over time, and that for the Fraser River flood, that estimated water level for the design flood is higher than it was at one time. And then across the region, going back to that 2015 Lower Mainland Dike assessment, as Mayor Tallon said, this is an issue that many municipalities are dealing with. 54% of the dikes inventoried had a crest below the design flood level, and only 4% were fully up to standard, including freeboard. So that's a lot of dikes in the region that aren't as high as they should be. And then just looking at the provincial standards for crest levels. So for the design flood in this region, it's the 1894 Fraser River flood of record, and that has an estimated lake level of elevation 14.1. Then the other components that go into the proposed level is the standard 0.6 meters freeboard. That's essentially your factor of safety for uncertainty, local fluctuations in water level, things like that. You would never design something to exactly an estimated water level. You would always include somewhat of a buffer. And then also, there is a need to consider wave runoff in an environment like Harrison Lake. You do have waves. You know, there were some questions about whether those waves would be dissipated by the shoreline and by the berm on the outside of the lagoon. And there would be some dissipation for that lagoon berm, though. It's about a meter and a half below the dike. So during the design flood, you know, that's a couple meters underwater. It may dissipate some larger waves, but it's not going to break up all waves. You're still going to get some wave run up on the shoreline. And the amount that we've included in the proposed crest level, 0.4 meters, is really, you know, on the low end of what you would consider. But that's been proposed just considering constraints around, you know, how high that dike could be along the shoreline. And then, you know, anything that we come up with does need to be approved by the province, by the inspector of dikes. We've had some early conversations with them and they seem to be on board with this approach. But I should just note that we will have to get anything through that approval.
Okay.
And I guess just one last note, this proposed crest level is based on present day water levels. There may be a need for further upgrades under climate change, depending how things play out.
I'll leave that for future council.
There you go.
We're just wrestling with the problem at hand.
But yeah, what they are gonna wanna see
Only
is,
6 feet under.
We'll all be 6 feet under 70 years from now.
what they are gonna wanna see is a design that facilitates those future upgrades. So, you know, having the appropriate right of way, if it's a flood wall, maybe having a foundation that can allow for a retrofit higher wall in the future, things like that.
Okay.
And then this is just a visual to help understand some of the elevations that we're looking at. So the existing dike is at elevation 13.9 meters, which is about a meter above Esplanade Avenue. That's about the height of the rock wall along there. And the proposed dike would be 1.2 meters higher than that. So fully constructed, that new dike would be about 2.2 meters or just over 6 feet above the street. There just were some questions about how high that would actually be, some suggestions that it might be much higher than that, but these are the elevations that we're looking at. And then just shown on there as well is the design lake level, the 1894 flood of record, and also the village has a flood construction level in its bylaws, which is about 14.6 meters, and it's based on that same lake level, that 1894 flood. And then Miami River is much lower than that. For context, the top of the bank is about 12 meters.
How long has the new construction level been? For a generation or so? Do we know that 14.55, has it been?
When did we bring that in, Al? The flood level construction, when did we bring that in? 205?
205, yeah.
205.
So for the last,
Originally was 1545, I think.
so houses built in the last 20 years are to the proper standard. So so in the event of a flood, they would not have their basements flooded. That's good news.
Yeah.
I just want to point out that I'm disappointed that we didn't have Mayor Talon's graphic up there, because his work was really quite amazing. I just want to point that out.
This
And thank him
is
for his
your,
efforts.
this is adapted from your graphic credit where it's due.
I'm a visual person and there's so much information here that I started to put it down in a way that I could digest it, because there's levels and different heights and I wanted the context. So I could see, I just needed to be able to understand myself, the part here that I can't get past is the flood of record being above the dike. And you think, oh, it's a flood. But your other slides before say the village would be under a meter plus of water. It's not just that the dike goes over by a foot. It means that that's the level of water through the village. So if you're sitting in a coffee shop on Esplanade Avenue, you're under 6 feet of water.
Yeah.
Right.
If there's an 1894 height of flood, because it'll just fill the village with water. Yeah.
In fairness, this is a very important graphic for people to be able to look at, because it really does, like Mayor Talon is saying, is that it really does show the impact. We're looking at 2 meters of water by the top of the bank at the river edge. So
So if we can put into the context of neighborhoods, anything built before 205 are gonna be under a meter, at least a meter, 6 feet, maybe 2 meters of water. Well, we don't really,
yeah,
but Miami River Drive is probably fine, like newer houses since 2005 are probably.
I think what you'll see is
Okay.
Miami River Drive will be under a meter of water, but the living area of houses is just above that.
Right. Oh.
See, so it's
Yes.
the flood, if I understand the flood construction level, that's where you have living spaces. Heated living spaces have to be 14.55. Obviously, the foundation and crawl spaces are below that level. So that's why if you look at the new houses on built, they all have a crawl space, there's the foundation, and then the living level starts 14.55 and goes up. So if there is a flood, your crawl space is flooded, but not your living area.
Oh, I see. So even places like Schooner and where I live on Emerson Cove, basements will be, crawl spaces will be with water. But the first floor
The
will be fine.
living area, the heated living area should be 14.55 higher. You may take a canoe to your front door.
We're gonna have to canoe. Right, exactly.
But your living area is dry.
for clarification, the way it is, it's mentioned in the bylaw is that it's the underside of the flooring system. So if you're had a 12-inch joist, then the underside of your joist is actually at 14.5. So then you have an extra foot of height. So for instance, if you're a slab on grade, the elevation would be roughly at 14.55.
And if I may, for people who haven't seen this, because like I said, I helped in the Sumas Prairie in Abbotsford when this happened a few years ago. When basements fill with water, it's not a matter of just pumping them out when everything dries out. They're full of silt and mud and crap and dead animals and brush. It is, a lot of people are just bulldozing their homes when that happens.
Yes. Please proceed, Mr. Mel.
Okay. So we talked about a bit about this already, but we did have some questions about project cost and the available funding. So we have about $11 million in grant funding, which council supported the applications of. We have $6 million from the UBCM Strategic Priorities Fund, and then $5 million from the Provincial Community Emergency Preparedness Fund. The objective for this project is to remain within the grant funding, but we also recognize that there is a lot of work that we're trying to get done here. So we do need to think about how to manage those project costs and some strategies for that. The work could be phased to target the higher priority components of it. And then in the meantime, you could use more temporary flood protection measures like, aqua dams or tiger dams until more funding can be sourced. But the objective is to come up with a comprehensive design that keeps everything within the grant funding. But it also needs to be a design that is supported by the community.
Keep going.
Disruption during construction. How long will construction take and how will disruptions be minimized? So these are just rough estimates. We won't have a better idea until the design is complete, and we won't fully know until we have a contractor on board who provides their construction plan. But you know, it's on the order of 3 to 4 months for the earthfill dikes and the wastewater treatment plant road, and another 3 to 4 months for the waterfront component of the dike. So to mitigate that, you could set requirements like constructing outside of certain peak seasons to minimize disruption to tourism. Also staging that reduces or eliminates impacts to parking along Esplanade Avenue, and also phasing construction over multiple years if needed to avoid certain times based on the project durations. And you know, any other mitigations that we would like to see could be considered as part of the approach.
Keep going.
Okay, and then this was probably the biggest one, just people concerned about impacts to the experience along the waterfront and blocking views if you're out on Esplanade Avenue, and the suggestion to use more deployable sections. So we've been putting some focus into that since the open house to try and work through some solutions there. So for having deployable sections along the waterfront, there are kind of two main categories of deployable flood protection. There's permanent engineered type solutions like those stop blocks that are shown there. Yeah, we have an example here in the room. Those have been used in many locations, including a waterfront project in Calgary. They are quick to deploy. You know, crews can by hand go and slot those stop logs in. They're a fully engineered solution. They're reliable. And then you have, I guess I would call them more emergency response type solutions. Yeah, like the aqua dams that the village currently has, yeah, those are typically more cumbersome to deploy. Their reliability is a bit more unknown. You're kind of not going to find out if they fully work until they're tested during that flood. They also, you know, as part of a design, they don't really deal with that seepage issue if they're just placed above grade. You know, there's no provision for cutting off that seepage through the soil, whereas if you constructed a stop log type system with a proper foundation, you could incorporate that.
Can I ask a question about seepage?
Yeah.
And it's sort of, if there was a flood, how long does it last? Like floods crest, the lake level crest to something bad, 14.3 meters, and it tests the whole dike system. It crests. How long does it stay, and what's the normal expectation for proceeding? Is it stay a month? Is it a week? Do you have any sense of, and obviously seepage, the longer the water is higher, the more risk of seepage, I would guess. But if it's like a 72-hour flood,
yeah,
does that impact seepage?
Let me see if I have that slide. Yeah, these are some historic floods here. We'll come back to this, but yeah, you know, it's probably about 2 weeks or so that you're kind of hovering around that peak where you're relying on that piece that's above grade. Yeah, roughly.
So if we had the flex tubes and they work, we need to count on them working for 2 weeks without failure.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and then also those flexible tube barriers. talking to a supplier, actually, they've told us typically they're single use. They can be reused with some care, but it's a bit like, trying to pack up your tent after you've taken it out of the packaging, or one of those mattresses in a box that's vacuum sealed. So some challenges there. They are potentially quite a bit lower cost, and may be the only feasible option from a cost standpoint in some cases, but they're definitely not as reliable a solution. And then main considerations, there's flood protection performance, operations, so deployment time and storage are very important for this, and then cost. Deployment time, so we did a quick look at what we should be aiming for in terms of deployment time, and just taking a very simple approach for when you might make that call to deploy the temporary flood protection. This is based on kind of a typical rate of rise during a large flood, and projecting that rate of rise to predict, at what water level below the existing dike you need to go out and start deploying the dike so that it's there by the time the lake rises. So if you had a 5-day trigger, looking at the data going back to 1933, that would have been deployed 5 times based on that trigger. 10-day, that would have been 66 times, and 15-day, that would have been most years, but maybe a couple. So this is obviously a very simplified approach. You would come up with a much more detailed operational plan. You could do something like a phased deployment where you deploy certain components at different times, and also the triggers. This is just based on looking at a lake level and saying when the lake gets to here, start deploying the dike. You might consider, the weather forecast, the flood forecast, things like that. But this just kind of highlights some of the drawbacks of having something that takes longer to deploy. You're more often going to deploy it for no reason. So we've kind of said about a week is probably reasonable for a trigger time, and a stop log system, if you did the entire waterfront, is deployable within a week. Something like aqua dams or tiger dams might take closer to 2 weeks to deploy, and that's based on actual experience. I know that staff here did a test run a few years ago, and took them, I think, a full day to deploy a relatively short section of it. So some challenges there that would need to be managed.
Councillor Schweiman.
Thank you. Just that assumes, though, that we're just using current staff, operational staff. Knowing this community, you would have a couple hundred volunteers being at the beach to help with the Tiger Dam and with the deployables. We could, I don't know how many hours or days, but I think it would go a lot faster than that if the community came through, and I think they would.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. So from a perspective of the stop log, that would totally make sense. You could put lots of people on something like that. The thing with the aqua dam or the other thing, it's all required to be filled with water. So you can have 4 or 5 people to lay out the dam, and you got to wait for the water to come. So that's the challenges. And where does the water come from? Are we using our municipal water system, or are we taking it from the lake? Or there's a lot of different factors that could delay that a little bit.
Councillor Fasher.
That's a very good point. By the way, I don't know whether you know this, but we do have the aqua dams. We purchased those in 208. Yeah, Jackson, I think 208. For the whole length from Rockwell Drive to the wastewater treatment plant. They came from Alberta. That's what we're told. I've still got the file on the installation of it, and they say you can do it in 1 day. We had a demonstration out here about 3 years ago with Kent and Harrison Fire Department and our staff. Each tube was filled within 9 minutes. We did the length of this field here very quickly.
Okay.
So the water's, say it would probably I'd come from the lake or the lagoon, who cares? As long as it's not that potable water, if we can save that. But yeah, so that's, they can be deployed very quickly once they're laid out, and we haven't. So I'll get back to later when we get some more questions regarding the $11 million. Thanks.
Okay.
Okay, so in terms of what's achievable within the current grant funding, we're probably not going to be able to do the entire waterfront with stop logs under the current funding. They're expensive. There's probably about 300 to 500 meters of that is achievable. So that would need to be prioritized. And that, we'll talk about some options for paths forward, but that's kind of what we're dealing with for a more formal engineered type solution. For something like the aqueducts, we could do the entire waterfront, but as we talked about, there are some challenges with performance and possibly deployment time. It would be good just to confirm that we have looked into that from talking to other municipalities as well who use these products. They do, from start to end take a while to deploy when you're actually using them. So strategies to move forward. Strategy one is a dike that is partially deployable. So you could have 300 to 500 meters of formally designed deployable sections using something like the stop logs, and then have permanent diking elsewhere. And that would include that view window concept that we previously presented, or you could adapt that and have a continuous opening section along the core commercial waterfront, and then install permanent diking outside of that. Or the other option is to just go after a fully deployable dike and then just figure out over time how to get it done. And that probably means, at least in the short term, using more emergency response type measures like the aquadams until the whole thing can be constructed. And then just some visualizations of what each of these strategies might look like. So this is that view window concept that we previously presented, where the idea there was to have regular, roughly 100-foot openings, which, if you're sitting at one of the businesses on Esplanade, gives you a pretty wide field of view from pretty much any location along there, until you encounter a permanent section of dike. So that's what the thinking was there. But as an alternative, you could do a stretch, that yellow stretch there, for example, that is constructed from deployable dike, where that would be left open, and then target permanent sections outside of that. And then the third option is just to do the entire waterfront deployable, eventually going after an engineered type solution for the deployables, but in the short term, relying on more of an emergency response type approach with something like aquadams. And yeah, I mean, these are just some of the options that we thought of. This is, of course, a discussion, just trying to come up with solutions based on what we heard from our engagement with the public.
Is that the end of the slide?
I think that's pretty much all I had.
I'm gonna just jump in here right now. I'd like to thank you for the presentation. I think it's the presentation I was looking for 6 months ago. I think it answers the questions we heard in multiple public houses, open houses, and the written in questions. So working with staff, I'm really happy with this presentation. What I wanted this committee, the whole meeting, was to make sure there were no unanswered questions about the need and the risk, about flooding and whether we respond. What I'd like to suggest is at the next council meeting, I will table a notice of motion. I think if we make any decisions on the dike project, it should happen at a regular council meeting. I'd like this presentation and this material to be in the public view for a couple of weeks to see if it's challenged, what happens, and to have the opportunity for residents to sort of be able to take in the information here, which is in response to a lot of questions we've had. The notice of motion, I will work with our corporate officer and CIO, but it would be something to the effect of, I'd like to break the decision-making into 2 chunks. And let me just pull this up here. The first part is whether we're going to proceed with the project or not. And the second part, if we decide to proceed with the dike project, get more information on deployable options and seek further public input about view corridors and where they should be and that kind of stuff. But the big question I think that really faces our, and Councillor Jackson's point's well taken, let's decide. So I think we're coming to the place of, I think we know with this presentation what the risk is, what the challenges are, and the background to it. If we're going to go ahead with it, then I think we need a council decision shortly to say we're going to proceed with it. We'll figure out the details subsequently, but we're going to proceed with it. So the notice of motion I would propose is something, I've written it out so I can keep track. Council resolves to proceed with the dike project complying with the provincial standards, a dike height of 15.1 meters to protect the village of Harrison Hot Springs from flooding from Harrison Lake. So it's Harrison Lake flooding, not the man. Council resolves to pursue flood protection with Harrison Lake with a combination of fixed and deployable structures, and that we say we're resolving to do this subject to the dike project must minimize fixed permanent features on the existing dike that would adversely affect the current view of Harrison Lake from Esplanade Avenue. And the dike project must maximize maintaining the existing views of Harrison Lake. So again, same thing from different, minimize impact and maximize views. Construction necessary to complete the dike project should avoid to the greatest extent possible heavy construction during July and August, traffic disruptions and reductions in parking on Esplanade Avenue, and also provide residents with the opportunity to provide input on where the deployable sections of the dike will be and where fixed sections will be, and also resolving to direct staff to return to council with recommendations concerning the deployable system or systems of flood protection. And if that resolution passes, then we get to the point of have another committee, the whole meeting, to look at deployable options. Maybe we do an open house actually on the dike when we mock up where the view corridors would be or where sections of fixed would be, whatever the proposals are. We seek more public input and then make a final decision on the details. Councillor Jackson.
Thank you, Worship. I really believe that council should make the decision or recommend right now that we proceed with zone 1 and zone 2. It does not affect the public, it just affects the wastewater plant. If that wastewater plant goes down, this whole village is in real deep trouble.
Yep.
I doubt we can insure it because it doesn't have the proper diking. Insurance companies are backing off on this all the time. And the longer we procrastinate, the more expensive it's going to become. Zone 1 and zone 2 needs to go ahead as quickly as staff can get it all together.
So thank you, Councillor Jackson. CEO Cook, we do have an existing council direction which is proceeding with design work.
Correct.
Do we need something more than like, until it's been designed, we actually can't construct it, so.
But
Do we need further resolution? Go ahead,
yeah,
CEO
yeah.
Cook.
Thank you, Your Worship. I don't think we need further direction. However, it does include zone 6, which is Randall Park.
Randall Park as
Now,
well.
we can, if council, like I'm hearing council, and I appreciate Councillor Jackson bringing that forward, and I feel the exact same way. If, as long as staff can continue down that road and we're not gonna circle back to that decision, then I think we're fine to move forward.
Councillor Fatchell.
I fully support the comments in regards to, is it 1 and 2 and 6?
Yes.
To move forward with that. And give the direction for staff to move forward with that. I know they're going to do some more planning, is it, or some more engineering that, but to move ahead with that, because like Councillor Jackson said, we've been discussing long before Mayor Talon or Councillor Schweinben has been here regarding the improvement to that road to the wastewater treatment plant, which, as you say, it's our main line there. So that's something that's urgent. That's number one. And Randall Park, and I think the other portions we can go with your, if you want more family or residential input, whatever, regarding whether I'm surprised that a 12 million or 11 million won't cover the whole works. I'm really surprised at that. Originally, we only asked for 6 million, and then we got the other 5 million, which is great. But the way it's going is if most of the money is going to be spent on 1, 2, and 6, that we do have the aquadams as a backup. So we're not totally in a bad way. So I don't know how you want to go, whether you want direction this morning.
Do we need to just reaffirm our past direction and
to move ahead with 1, 2, and 6.
the problem that I have no issues with affirming the council direction and have staff continue to work. I think the challenge is it's an entire dike project. So whatever we do in 1, 2, and 6 needs to link in with the other sections, I'm guessing.
Yeah, so you kind of just answered my question. Based off council's previous direction, we have been proceeding with initial design. So we are at 30% design for zone 1 and 2. There's been a bit of a pause just because environmental permitting to get to the next stage would kind of involve the entire stretch, but we can start looking at getting further ahead on the detailed design to get to a point of submitting for permits.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. And I think just so if you look at where zone 6, it cuts right off at essentially at the boat launch.
Yeah.
That's a good point for us to be able to build 2, and then same thing with the east side, or sorry, west side, it cuts off at the flood pump.
That's right.
So that's another good stop point.
Okay.
So that and I recognize what Mayor Talon is saying. It is, and Daniel as well. It is all one project, and they need to integrate very well. But we know full well at the east end is that there's a deployable section in front of the boat launch. That's a perfect cutoff point.
Okay. Councillor Biden.
Thank you, Mayor Talon. Yeah, I'm in support of moving ahead with zone 1, 2 and zone 6. But I also wanted to bring up the point about additional funding. I also sit on with a group of First Nations called the Flood Coalition, who are consistently, and I agree, that we should perhaps be taking a more regional approach to flooding and to diking. Nothing has come of that yet. but there is advocacy work going on both at the provincial and the federal level. So my point with funding also is that I think we should also be having staff keep eyes open for additional funding. Because my opinion, if we're gonna do this, let's do it right. And probably through Lower Mainland LGA or UBCM, we can do some advocacy work there for additional funding. But I think the first, strategy here is moving ahead with zone 1, 2, and zone 6. So Daniel, if you like, I'll be in contact with you with the members and the chair of that flood coalition. It goes all the way from Hope down through the Fraser Valley. So it may be worthwhile for you just become updated on what their work is. So,
Sure, that'd be great.
all
Thank you.
right, thank you.
CAO or maybe Director of Operations. Are you waiting for council direction on zones 1, 2, or 6 to take the next steps? Or do you have, are you working through the stage right now? Or do you need some additional direction from council to continue to work? Is council direction right now an impediment to the design work you're doing?
Thank you, Your Worship. At this time, no, but what my expectation would be is when we get to that 75% design, that we would present it to council and show the areas of impact. We know full well there's going to be a challenge around the where the source is along the road out to the wastewater treatment plant. There's no anticipated issues around the wastewater treatment plant, but there will be focus areas that we'll want to bring back to council. And throughout the process, we can certainly update as we go. There's no challenge there, I don't think. So,
Okay.
We want a motion on the floor, Councillor Jackson or Councillor Fascio, to affirm council's past direction to proceed with the design of dike improvements to the provincial standard for sections 1, 2, and 6. Second, that's a motion on the floor. Second, any discussion on that motion? I think we talked about it all morning. Call the vote, all in favor? Okay, great. That's good. I will, after this meeting, I'll circulate this notice of motion, just so you all have it, and I'll work with the corporate officer and CIO, so you have it in advance of our meeting on Tuesday.
correct.
And then hopefully the subsequent meeting, we can get there with the, council's direction on whether to proceed generally with the dike project. Councillor Swinton.
Thank you, Mayor Tom. A couple questions and I've got a comment. The first one is with regards to the existing Tiger Dam. Apparently, you said that we tried it 4 or 5 years ago. There's rumors that, the rats have got at it. Is it still operational?
It was then. There were no rat holes. That broom is from unfortunate people in the village.
Okay, thank you for clarifying. And then secondly, and we did touch on this about the Miami River, and there was a letter from Dr. Corkle a couple of weeks ago with regards to the risk frequency regarding the Miami River. And it was stated today that it conveyed water as designed, yet backyards were still flooded back in 2021, I think it was, during the atmospheric river. And apparently there was some operational issues with one of the screws or with one of the gates, and maybe with one of the reservoirs that the screws take water out of. Do we need a study on that as well to make sure it's working? I can speak directly.
And I see a whole bunch of hands. I'll let CEO just try and respond with some facts and we can get to you, Councillor.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. That is not true, unfortunately, or fortunately, I should say. The challenge that we have at the intake is that if there's debris in the river, it can block up the trash rack that's there, and it will slow down the full potential of the water coming into into the pumps, but there was no issue. There was the flooding was not the result of the functionality of the flood pump. And I will say to council that staff has directed NHC to do a fulsome study of the existing flood pump and whether there's any improvements. And I will say that the top of the flood wall, or sorry, the flood pump is at that 1894 elevation. So in the event that we do see a 1894, it's not going to be the flood pump that's going to allow water in, is what I'm saying. So it was designed with that the future in mind. Now there have been, we'll go through the process, and if there's any improvements that need to be made, then we'll definitely be looking for opportunities.
Good. Thank you.
That's why I partly put that little graphic together with the river level. It's lower, obviously.
Right,
than that. And I think the question that came in from Mr. Corporal was, I think there's greater risk of flooding from atmospheric rivers than from the flooding from the lake, which I think is probably, well, yeah, we get more rainstorms. And the question that Tyson tried to answer is one sort of followed up on. If we get flooding from the lake, the perfect storm on the river backing up the lake and flooding the lake, and we have an atmospheric river, we wanted to know that would the screw pumps be pumping where they have to go up over into the lake? Otherwise, we have a perfect storm on a perfect storm, and then we can't pump water out of the river. And so, but anyway, the screw pumps are at the 1890. They're higher than the 1894.
Okay, good.
So we can actually do that. Councillor Fatchin.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just 2 comments on that. As CEO comment, there was debris, and the debris unfortunately was coming from certain campgrounds that floated down the river and blocked the area. And those who live in the older homes like I used to, with a sub basement, if you don't have a sump pump, then you're in trouble. Yeah. Whether it's an atmospheric river or whether it's just a year when the water is very high. When I lived on Miami River Drive, I used to have the Miami River halfway up my backyard. And that's, but if you don't have that sump pump on these sub basements, the older homes in Harrison, then you're in trouble. But other than that, there was no other major flooding except for the pool of water on Hot Springs Road, which was pretty bad at that time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Vital. You had your hand up there.
Thank you, Mayor Tell, and through you to Tyson. Thank you for your comments during that heavy rainstorm. It's my understanding, and I was in council at that time, that the pumps were doing exactly what they were designed to do. And yes, Councillor Facio is correct. There was some debris from campground in the area that got into the river. I believe that that debris was removed very quickly. I know at that time that there was concern about the wastewater treatment plant, and a alternate was looked at to possibly access the treatment plant via boat. During that time, there was minimal flooding, especially with some of the houses or yards, houses along Miami River Drive, and the road that I live on. Had some flooding, and there was abandoned cars, so we can only do what we can do. And if we need to upgrade, the screw pumps and that, then we'll look at that. I just don't want to lose focus on what council has agreed on today, and that is to move ahead with the design of zone 1, 2, and 6. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Swan.
Thank you, Mayor Town. I was gonna make a comment after those questions. You know, the devil's in the details, and I really think that we could make a better dike. We could have better access, and we're gonna raise it, but it could be more beautiful, wider. Maybe we put more infrastructure on it to make it a better community. The reality is, this is not a popular thing in the community. Most people are against it. Most people have concerns about it. This is weighing on all of us. And the reality is, it may not ever get used during our lifetimes. But, and the reality is, this could also cost us our political careers on council, but you have to make the right decision sometimes. And I think from what I'm hearing about council is we need to go forward with this. And hopefully we can come up with a great design that makes it a better waterfront for everybody, for tourists and for commercial businesses and for residents. And I think I appreciate the information that we received here. I appreciate the community involvement, and I think everybody will feel better about this process going forward. So.
Thank you. Sierra Cook.
If I may just make a comment, I do appreciate council's heartfelt concern and for the community, both their safety as well as their concerns. I do appreciate the amount of effort that council is putting into this project, and I also do want to make a point of thanking staff and my team and Daniel for putting in the amount of work that they have been trying to come up with options to through that deployable section. We have contractors that are working in town that we're talking to, and they're coming up with concepts for us. So it is a known issue, and we are working as hard as we can to find an engineered solution that minimizes the impact to everything. So I appreciate council's effort.
Yeah, I saw an early draft of this presentation. I thank Tyson for it. I think it's probably one of the more important documents that our council will review. For me, it answers a lot of the questions about risk and what we're staring at today, and there's some lessons learned from some neighboring communities, Merritt, Grand Forks, Princeton, about if you do suffer a flood, it's not over when the waters recede. So if there's no further comments on our 5A agenda item, we'll go to 5B, which is a presentation on the Village Lands Master Plan from our Director of Operations.
Thank you very much, Daniel.
Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me today.
Really good job.
Yeah,
Thank you so much.
thank you. Yeah, take care.
Have a great Easter weekend.
Yeah, you too.
Travels.
Yeah, thank you.
Too many eggs.
I don't know why you're going to Pemberton. You could come to Harrison.
Yeah.
With your family. Jeez, what's the matter with you?
We're going mountain biking.
Oh, you are? Well, we got mountains here too.
Yeah.
And bikes.
Yes, and bikes. Just need some trails. Thanks again.
Take care. Thanks so much.
What was yours?
Thank you. So just shifting views here now, we're now looking at presentation on the Civic Lands Master Plan that was created by Modus land use planning consultants that we worked with, and just kind of giving an overview of the project and where we are at today. So the main purpose of this presentation is to provide council with an overview of the engagement that's done to date. Also an overview on the three options that were presented by Modus in your agenda package. We'll also be looking at a summary of feedback from the different public engagements processes that we went through to come up with these designs. And then next steps and recommendations for council on how to proceed. So through the options that Modus looked at after doing public engagement and site constraints and advantages of this location, they came up with three ideas. Idea one was to keep it simple. So development parcels are small scale and independent, allowing for phased implementation. So within this, there were 5 conceptual ideas. Number 1 was townhomes on Miami River Drive. Number 2 was neighborhood park. 3 was arts and culture campus. 4, standalone seniors housing. and 5 internal plaza and civic mixed-use building. Idea 2 was called Better Together. Following the BC Builds precedent, civic uses are integrated with complementary functions for efficient and compatible development. So within this are 4 conceptual ideas: a civic mixed-use building, neighborhood park with a large civic open space, arts and culture campus, and standalone seniors housing with amenities. Idea 3 was called Bigger Players. So the development adapts to a large-scale approach with key programs distributed across 2 main build forms. Within this are 4 concepts: a large-scale seniors living, publicly accessible private open space, and a civic plaza. And number 3 was Arts and Cultures Campus, and 4 was the civic mixed-use building. So through the engagement process, it started with background mapping. So Modus Development was a consultant that we had hired for this project to guide us through. That was in September and October of 2024. So they came in, did an overview of the land, found site constraints, site opportunities, and kind of created a map to how we should move forward with the process. This triggered on October 24th a public open house where they came to Harrison here and got feedback from the public, and sort of understanding what people wanted with the space and concerns and opportunities that we're seeing. On November 8th, a committee of the whole meeting happened where council's input was also gathered to help shape the plan. This moved into site analysis and program options, where all the information was gathered and it was looked at to see what kind of opportunities there were. In November, a design shred happened. So Modus came to site here. They did an intense design workshop over 3 days, working with staff, and it ended up with a public pinup. So they were on site coming up with conceptual ideas and drawings, and it was all up on posters that were all around this room here. Then the public was able to come, provide comments, talk to the consultants, and sort of provide further input. After that, the designs that were brought forward from that charrette were left up here for 2 weeks, where the public could come in and just view and provide further input. Through this process, a summary report was created by Modus, which is the one you're looking at in the agenda package. Once we received this report, we brought it to another public open house on March 3rd to do a survey and get further input from the community, which leads us now to our council presentation today. So through a summary of engagement, there's a survey that was done at the open house, and residents were able to respond to their priorities and create a order of importance for that. So of the ideas that were proposed from Modus's plan, the one that received the most positive feedback was the seniors housing. That's priority 1. Priority 2 is an indoor multi-use space. Priority 3, arts and culture. Priority 4, municipal office and council chambers. Priority 5, outdoor gathering, and priority 6, commercial marketplace. So we also had asked, as part of the survey, to look at the 3 ideas, provide a preferred option, and 43% respondents favored idea number 2 as a preferred option of Better Together. So next steps would be the adoption of the master plan with council's preferred option. With that, we don't necessarily need a designated option. We feel that all options could be integrated in different ways depending on the direction that it comes as staff look into these different options and partnerships. The next steps would also be exploring funding options, because that will shape what actually happens.
Yes.
And also partnerships. So partnerships kind of go hand in hand with funding to see what can actually be possible and what opportunities are available through different partnerships. Once those are determined, a phased implementation plan can be made, because as we know, this is a master plan. It is a long-term phased approach to how to use this space and area. And within that, through the engagement, we did hear as the number one constraint was parking. So staff would like to explore parking requirements and be able to come up with options throughout the designs on how parking can be integrated and captured correctly. So recommendation is that council adopts the Civic Plans Master Plan and that staff report back to council on the cost and feasibility of moving the public works yard and pursuing community partnerships. Thank you.
Thank you, Director of Operations. I like how we're slowly peeling this back. Partnerships are going to be key, and I like keeping parking. We can enhance parking and not see a reduction in parking in the village. Opportunities for that probably this summer with paving on Lillooet, but also keep in mind that this piece of land is overflow parking. There's a lot of cars on there in the summer, and they're going to go somewhere else if the land isn't overflow parking. So I appreciate that being on the list here. And I do take the point that what really makes gives us more flexibility and potentially a bigger range of options is if the public works yard can be relocated somewhere in the village. That would be key. Go ahead, Councilor.
Once you finish your.
No, I'm done. I'm getting late. I feel like it's 9 o'clock at night.
Just quickly move this, just from my perspective, I'm taking a page out of Councillor Jackson's this morning. We purchased this property in 1993, and the object then was to build a civic centre. And then we've come to this point. We nearly got there a few years back, but due to the alternative process, it was turned down because of the operating costs. But we got to a point here with our meetings last year at UBCM and BC Build on board with these type of things, as Jay showed us from Rosslyn, was it, or somewhere there, how they did it there. I think we should phase this in, and our priority should be the public first. The works yard has been here for 50 years. Yes, maybe it needs to be moved, but we should concentrate on the public first. And we've had a lot of people that have come to us, and I know a couple of elderly people who left the village because they want to downsize, is to go with the seniors area and also the rental portion. And we obviously, which most of us agree, we need a better office for the staff and chambers. So I think we should phase this in by concentrating on that. The concept number 2 seems to be the one that the folks, 43% prefer, and I like that idea as well. It gives it parks and open spaces, and I believe, is that the one where suggestion was of Hot Spring, Miami there being for residential townhouses or something?
That was
to
first.
recoup some money
That was the first.
towards
option.
that.
Yeah.
So from my perspective, I think number 2 is great, but we should phase it in over years, and we should concentrate on the public first with the 2 buildings to accommodate the seniors, the rental and the staff and the chambers. So how you want to proceed forward with that, Your Worship, I'm not sure, but I don't want to be sitting here at the end of next year and nothing's been done. We should get a plan moving here to move forward.
Thank you, Councilor Panashia. Councilor Vital.
Thank you, Mayor Talon. I do agree with option number 2, but with a question through to Jace. If we were to say, yes, let's go with option 2, we're not absolutely committed to that. We could take elements from the other options if we felt that that would be beneficial. Is that correct?
Through you, yes, that is correct. These are just conceptual ideas to kind of provide a bit of a framework. So the idea would just be to direct staff to start pursuing these options, and then a report would come back with what we've discovered, some partnership opportunities, cost implications. And then from there, we obviously go into more detailed ideas and design features. So ideas from all could be incorporated. It doesn't have to be exactly that, but it's all just kind of giving an idea of how the space could be laid out.
Okay, I do think that no matter what we decide, that the public works yard will need to be moved. So I am fully of the recommendation. So do you require a motion to?
There are two motions, yes.
Oh,
But I believe Councillor Swinburne.
Yeah, Councillor.
okay.
Oh, that's okay. No, I'm supportive of the no, sorry.
Supportive
Mayor
of the-
Talon, if I may.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
And I couldn't quite hear what you're saying about parking, but we're going to have to address the loss of parking. If it fits 200 cars now, it's probably only going to fit 100 in the future. I don't know what the exact math is, but we're going to have to come up with a parking solution. Otherwise, this isn't going to work. But I wanted to make a comment because my wife and I have been in Victoria a lot, trying to look, part of it is because we're looking for senior housing for my mother-in-law, my dear mother-in-law. I'll say that publicly. My favorite mother-in-law. Anyways, and I'm not so sure that it's, and these facilities are wonderfully staffed, nice facilities, most of them. And I'm not so sure that it has a place here. I'm trying to get my head around a mixed use office civic area, maybe with some public, and then being a landlord or in partnership as landlords with 36 suites upstairs. These people need staff, they need medical attention, they need help, and I just don't, maybe a very low level of care, if I may finish, maybe a very low level of care we could have, but I just don't see how Harrison Hot Springs can support something like we have in Agassiz. That's a comment that I have, but the reality is I'm in support of this because we need to get the ball rolling. This is a 10-year project. We got to get started on it. Thank you.
So many comments there. I don't know where to start. Councillor Vital first.
Thank
Dennis,
you, Mayor Talon,
yes,
through you
Councillor
to
Vital.
Councillor Schweinband. I don't believe that the concept of seniors housing that we are looking at is not along the lines of a long-term care facility. I believe that what we're looking at is independent living, which would be attracted to seniors who want to downsize from where they are, whether they are in single family dwelling or a town, or a town home. It's not my understanding that it would, because there's different levels of care with senior, and certainly Shiem and Agassiz does have both independent, assisted living, and a memory ward also. So that's my understanding of what conceptually what we were talking about. So thank you, and that's it. That's all.
Councillor Jackson.
Well, thank you, Worship. The practical way to do this, we came within one vote of 210 of rebuilding Memorial Hall and having our staff premises in the next 2 or 3, building a 4-story building. That's the practical thing to do, because if you redo Memorial Hall, put it there, then you free up all this land. You could have the land for parking or whatever you want. I personally think you have to look to the future, and just putting it here and using up to, we can't create any more land. So I'm sorry I said it because it puts something, another element in this, but sometimes you have to look at the real practical side of it.
Thank you,
That's my
Councillor.
rant for the day.
It's not a rant. I think it's a fair point, and I think this is a big piece of land. You can only use it once, develop it once. Once it's gone, and that's why I think the Public Works Yard I support the recommendation because I think that's not the highest best use of the land here. And the public works yard, if it was relocated, frees that up. There are conversations starting with the school board, if there's a new school and what happens with the old school. So there may be, not Memorial Hall, but there may be opportunities for repurposing buildings. And the more land here, the more flexibility I think we have. I lean to recommendation 3, option 3. I think we go big and do it really nice, have a really nice space that keeps the views of Sham in the back and just maximizes the public space and the green space. I was in Hope a couple weeks ago, and they've got that huge civic plaza in the middle of town. And part of what makes that really nice is it's grass, it's open with trees, there's a couple of small buildings, it's low, but it gives you a real sense of, yeah, it has a nice feel to it. Not because it's all built up, but because it stayed open.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just for council's knowledge, as this week, I've been reached out from Angus Harrison Community Services looking to partner with the village on potential housing projects. So that is very, very early stages, but there's pretty significant interest there. So which could move into the model of seniors housing or subsidized housing in order to, like, I think the model is it's like a 30%, it can't be more than 30% your income, which would be ideal for some residents in town, but that's early days.
And I think if we're talking seniors housing, I mean, there's a whole scale from nursing home to independent living and various supports all the way through. Councillor Patrick.
Thank you. First of all, I agree with Councillor Vital that the concept of the seniors is not to be. We did have a proposal here many years ago for a congregate care facility. Unfortunately, it was turned down 3-2 by council. That would have been built. But no, the idea is just, I've been getting for many, many years, people saying, we want to stay in Harrison. When we get to a certain age, we want to downsize. We haven't got time for the gardening or a big house or the stairs, whatever the case may be. So they're not looking for to be looked after or nursed or to be there with them. It's just somewhere they can move into. Now, I've lived here 48 years now in Harrison Hot Springs. It's never changed. You've got the odd long weekends that we have, and that's where you get the build up of traffic. After those long weekends are gone, there's no, the traffic is well maintained on Hot Springs Road. So I'm not convinced of this situation. If you lose this, now the village streets are village streets. It doesn't bother me when I have cars parked out down my stone, they don't block my driveway. That's everywhere you go, whether it's Vancouver, it's everywhere. So this concept, Councillor Jackson was right. Years ago, we wanted to tear down the Memorial Hall and build 4 stories there with offices, a theatre, and even a space to rent. That didn't happen, unfortunately. It didn't happen, unfortunately. Now we're in a situation where we're getting, well, I am, and the rest of council, getting people concerned. They want to stay in Harrison, but they want to downsize and have somewhere where they can live. And I think that's the one thing we should concentrate is the people first, not the tourists. The tourists, they'll come here and they'll park whatever they can. While this is empty, they'll use it. After that, we've got 65 spots are opening up at the end of Esplanade, which we never had a year ago. 65 spots opening up there. So that's a great benefit to the village, that opening up. So I'm personally, we should do a phasing project. We don't have the money. I agree with whatever the mayor says, or you want to phase part of the others into it, or do all phase 3, whichever works out, but it has to be phased in. We can't do all in one go. I mean, this could be the next council, the council after, before it's all completed, because of the funding to do this. And again, with the works yard, the option of the 1 acre come up, but and then when we're talking about the dog park, Councillor Schweinben says, well, if you have a dog park, all the trees are going to come down. Well, if we have a works yard there, all the trees are going to come down on that 1 acre. You can't leave one tree. Oh, that's going to be totally, boom, to put a workshop there, where there can still be, workshop can still go on a contaminated soil on McPherson, where it was originally suggested in the previous OCP. I do not know. It was considered as a very low contaminated area by the Minister of Environment when he was here with us many years ago. Where that can still be used. That's why we extended the water line down McPherson for that reason, in case at that time the workshop was going to go there, but that never happened. It never moved. So there's a lot of options here going around, but let's get something moving. We'll be talking here in the next 15 years about the same piece of land if we don't do something. It's been laying there since 1993. Anyway, that's my rant for this morning.
Then I am happy to move the recommendation, which I think is a first phase to move this forward, adopt the master land, move the recommendation as worded here.
I'll second.
Second by Councillor Vital. Any other discussion on that motion? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All in favor, and that carries unanimously, and that'll be step one towards doing something. Let's not adopt a master plan, and now we'll start taking the work necessary to figure it out. Thank you, Director of Operations.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Councillor Swain.
If I may quickly, just something, or do your terms?
Not yet,
No, not yet.
but you better talk quick.
Yeah, actually said, maybe something we should work towards is since 2010, it sounds like we haven't looked at critically the Memorial Hall. And it's kind of tied in. I agree with you. It's tied in. It's a civic land. It's a major asset. Maybe we need to look at some studies. What could be done there? The acoustics could be improved. Maybe we raise it and put some, I don't know, some offices upstairs for the staff. Maybe we need a study done there.
We're gonna talk about this a lot more. Councillor Vital.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mayor Talon. I do agree with Councillor Scheinbens. However, let's focus on what we can do right now.
Yep.
And further down, the Memorial Hall is getting used far more than it ever has been. So I think we should put that for later discussion for Memorial Hall. And with that, I am going to make a motion to adjourn.
Second, Councillor Fascio. Discussion on that? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All in favor, and we are adjourned.
I got it.
So,
Thank
here
you.
I come.
Everyone have a good long weekend.
Yes, you too. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.